For a long time, we have been wanting to smash the nest of these weaver birds, to raise the city of these Muslim foreigners and throw it into the river, to burn the enclosure of these swine and purify Mother Earth again. Brothers, that day has come. Let us purify that pigsty by fire and throw it into the river.
This is an excerpt from Anandmath, the novel from which India's national song Vande Mataram is taken from. Vande Mataram became a source of controversy recently, with the Prime Minister blaming Congress in the 1900s for removing some sections from the song that mention some Hindu goddesses. This seems to be a stick to beat minorities with, because in its current form, the novel is filled with anti-Muslim rhetoric like the one we saw at the beginning of this video. But there is some history to the evolution of plot of this novel that we don't know about. So when poet and novelist Bankim Chandra wrote first version of Anandmath, the English were the prime enemy in the plot of the novel, and there was no anti-Muslim rhetoric. But in subsequent versions of Anandmath, the villain changes from the British to the Muslims. But why? Why did Bankim Chandra make these changes? First, some background about the inspiration behind the events of this semi-historical novel. The plot of Anandmath is set in 1760s Bengal, a time when Bengal saw widespread famine that wiped out 1/3 of its population in a span of couple of years. This famine was a result of the greed of East India Company after they won over the whole province after the Battle of Buxar. Novel is about a guru named Satyananda who is held hostage by the East India Company and is then rescued from the foreign enemy by his disciples named Santans, literally the children of Bharat Mata. Some scholars believe that the story is inspired by a Maharashtrian revolutionary called Vasudev Phadke, who was also a sannyasi who tried to arrange a rebellion to overthrow the British just few years before Bankim Chandra wrote Anandmath. But according to Bankim Chandra himself, the plot is inspired by the events of 1772-73, where a group of Hindu sadhus and Muslim fakirs fought the British in Bengal province. Interestingly, from 1858 to 1895, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee himself worked as a magistrate under the British Raj, and he would have definitely lost his plush job if this novel with a plotline against the British would have come out. The original novel was first published as a multi-part series in a magazine called Bangladesh. And like I said, in these first versions, the British are the only primary enemy. But within next few years, 4 to 5 more editions of the book come out, and we see the plotline totally changing character. For example, in one earlier version of the novel, a character tells another one that a Raja or a ruler has to look after his subjects, and their current Raja, meaning the British, has not been able to do that. In an edition of the novel that came afterwards, Bankim Chandra changes the wording of this particular sentence and writes Muslim Raja, so that there's no confusion who is talking about to the British. In an earlier version, a battalion of English and Telugu soldiers are defeated by the Santans. But in next edition, the English word is redacted and is replaced with the word sepoy. Similarly, in one of the earlier versions of the novel, an English commander named Watson, who was actually a historical figure from that time, is being fired by the Santans hiding in the trees. This whole section is dropped in the next edition. In the earlier versions, it's clearly mentioned that the enemy of the Santans are the English. But in later edition, all references to the English are replaced with Yavanas, a common term used in Hindu scriptures since long for all kinds of foreigners, including Muslims. Not only this, Bankim Chandra even changed the dates and locations of the rebellion in later versions, so as to make the English government feel that the events in the plot have no connection to the events of 1773 when the rebellion was at its peak. So semi-historical novel that was supposed to be about a grassroots rebellion against the British Raj was over 5 editions turned into a fictional rebellion against the Nawabs of Bengal. And the hate and violence against the white men turned into hate against Muslims. But why did Bankim Chandra do that? I think the reason was that he wanted to keep his plus job as a magistrate under British Raj and escape the British censure, which he was successfully able to do after making these changes. See, all through the 1800s and especially after 1857, if there was one propaganda that the British spread about themselves, it was this image of them rescuing the common people of Hindustan from the cruel Nawabs and the Mughals. So when later editions of Anandmath started speaking in the same tone as their propaganda, they must have clearly approved of it. We can see this clearly in the plotline itself, because towards the end of the novel, when the Guru is rescued by the Santans, The Santans ask him what to do next because now the Muslims have been replaced by the East India Company. And the Guru explains that we should now accept the foreign rule because the Arya Dharma will find its full expression under them. But the story of Anandmath doesn't end here. There were other Bengali revolutionaries who were able to see through the Hindu chauvinism of this novel. In Rabindranath Tagore's novel Ghere Bere, there is a character Nikhil who is uncomfortable with Vande Mataram, its exclusionary notion of nationalism, as it displays hatred against a particular group of people. And that's why when the question of singing Vande Mataram in Congress sessions arose, Rabindranath Tagore advised to use only the first few sections. So this is the story of how the song Vande Mataram and the novel from which it was taken changed character over time.